The Cannondale Si crank is a wonderful modular crank set that is responsible for an awful lot of creaking that people have no idea it's their crank creaking. I'm going to show you the ins and outs of how to make sure your Cannondale crank does not creak, and if it is creaking, how to fix it. And it starts right here. I just got done taking one of these bolts out. Whenever you take the bolts out, come on in here and I'll show you. You need to inspect around this rim, okay, and around this area right here to make sure that this bolt is not cracked. They can crack. They do have quite a bit of torque on it. It's a bit unusual, but they do crack, and when they do, what it does is it doesn't put enough pressure on the arm and can cause a creak later. On to the next one. There are several ways to take these arms off. Some of them require special tools, some of them don't. Here's kind of a hybrid mix. This is the tool right here that is usually supplied with a little piece that threads inside of here, right there, as you'll see it in there. But what I usually like to use on top of this tool is your good old-fashioned crank arm puller from an ISIS or an Octolink bottom bracket of the past. Okay, so once I get the crank off, I want to draw your attention to this immediately. Okay, this is the retaining ring right here that holds the spider onto the crank arm. The reason why this is important for a lot of reasons. When that thing is loose, it will cause a creaking problem. Here's how I like to diagnose it right off the gun. I go ahead and I put my hands like this, and I put my thumbs on either side of here, and I try to flex it. I'm pushing it away. I'm pushing it really hard away, and then I grab it like this in my hands, and I see if I can make it creak. You absolutely need this tool. It's very specific to the SI cranks. If you want to come in here, what it does is it gets down inside of those. You see these grooves right there? Those match. They go right down inside there. You need to make sure that they're seated in there really well, that it's not like, you know, cocked to the side or like partially. Now, what I like to do is if you're just going to grab this and try to loosen it, it's like 40 Newton meters. It's going to be extremely difficult. You're probably going to skip off and start to chew this thing up. I like to take this thing, it's got these nice flat sides on it. I like to put it in a vise. And you're going to want to get in here and line these up just like that. Make sure it's lined up all the way around, okay? So take a good look at it. And you just got to kind of remember which way it lefty loosey, righty tighty, right? So I just put pressure down on it so it doesn't want to skip on the tool, and I just bump it. So once I get this off, the very next thing I want to do is do this right here. Hear that? Hear how it has a nice ring to it? If this thing was cracked, it would go dung like that. It would sound, you wouldn't be able, it would make a dead sound. And if it's cracked, you cannot reuse it, of course. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and take this apart. Now, let's go ahead and put it back together again. And I want to show you guys this. Look inside there. Look inside there, right there. Can you see that movement? You can certainly hear it. Right there. You can hear it up put the microphone. So that's the issue we're trying to solve. Okay, we want to take care of that problem, and we're going to take care of it with a little tube of this. Back from a good cleaning, and all I did was use a toothbrush and some Dawn dishwashing soap or some kind of liquid soap to get all the grease and oil off of, because that will defeat the Vibratite, or the another good one to use would be Loctite 609. Vibratite 530, Loctite 609 are chemically almost identical, and they will work in the same applications. So now what I'm going to do, now that I've got this completely dry and everything after a soapy water bath, is I am going to do something very simple, and you've seen me do this in other videos. I am just going to go ahead and get it all over these splines right here. Alright, so yeah, it's looking pretty messy, but we want to go ahead and make sure we get it on there in the right way. See how it's popping up right there? It's all together. We're going to take this lock ring. You do not put grease on it. Okay, yeah, it's going to get a little bit of Loctite on it. The lock ring actually says 34 foot-pounds on it. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our torque wrench to 34 foot-pounds, and then we're going to come back in here, and we're going to do like we did before. Now, oh, make note, I've got it back in the vise. I've got the crank arm clamped into the vise with some soft jaws. Okay, these are non-marring, like rubberized, hard soft jaws, so they'll grip very well, and they will not cause any damage to the crank arm. This is a must. You could use a couple of pieces of 1x4 or something if you're doing this at home and get away with the same thing. All right, so I want to go ahead and I'm going to get this thing lined up where it's supposed to be first. Rather than stick it on the wrench and then put the wrench on there, because that's harder to do. And now I'm going to try to use one fluid motion, right? And I'm going to tighten this thing to 34 foot-pounds. All right. Perfect. And guys, the potency of this stuff cannot be underestimated. I can tell you right now that, and I got this thing all nice and cleaned up now, and I got all the residue off, but if I took this lock ring back off after this was completely cured out for at least 24 hours, and even if longer than that, I should have to take a hammer, and I would have to take a hammer and tap this thing pretty hard to get it to finally break loose and come off. Whereas before, if I took the lock ring off, I could just shake it and it would fall off. That's the difference. It's rigidly affixed to the crank arm because creaks are caused by movement. If you get rid of movement, you get rid of creaks. And that's what this is all about. We also want to take this apart, and the reason for that is twofold. I don't trust that this interface over here has been cleaned and greased properly, and we want to make sure the entire crank, all the mating surfaces, are fresh. The other reason is, it's not as important on this crank because this particular one is not the Hollowgram. The Hollowgram is very important to look around the periphery of this hole and to look all around inside of here, and on this crank arm, if this was out, which will be in a second, to look around there because they can develop cracks over time. Now that I got it all nice and cleaned up, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the end of this spindle, and I'm going to put some inside here on the threads. This way I don't have to put it directly on the threads of the bolt. Alright, and then the bolt itself, underneath the bolt head, I am going to put a little bit of grease right there. Right, this is going to help have a nice accurate torque spec when it all comes down to it. And then a little bit there, because these are all surfaces that are supposed to slip. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to bolt this together using the specification that is printed on this bolt right there. 40 Newton meters, 30 foot-pounds. All right, I'm not going to bore you with that one, but I can tell you right now, once this is tightened, I am going to take this entire assembly right here and I'm going to go put it in the freezer. And it's going to be in there for about half an hour to an hour. And what that's going to do is it is going to shrink the diameter of this very slightly so that it will slide into the bearings rather than having to use a hammer to put it in. Right from the freezer, I want to make sure to get my get the right spacer on the non-drive side. This thing is nice and cold right now. You can see it's kind of icy. And I went ahead and I prepped this all out with some grease. And now I'm going to show you guys how I do not need to use a hammer to put it in. Yeah, well, I shouldn't have to. This thing was really hard to get out, so this is going to make it significantly easier. See that? Now, you might have said to yourself, that still looked hard. I had to beat this thing out with a hammer to get it out, so trust me, that's a big improvement. The reason why this is important is because, and we need to work fast, is because we need this wave washer to be able to do its job, and if the spindle is stuck in the bearings, the wave washer can't do its job because it'll just get stuck wherever it is put by the friction. Come on in here and take a look. You can see that I've got a little gap here where it needs to be. They were nice enough to make this orange, so it's real obvious. That's sitting right about a 70 to 80% wave washer compression. That's great. On our product, between 70 and 90% is great. We want to see at least that much. Remember, we have a true drive sleeve in between there, so it cannot move the inner races toward each other and over preload them. So in this case, we want to see a little more compression here than in a normal situation, like a two-piece from another manufacturer, because they would not be able to handle that. The cranks wouldn't spin very well. And as you can see, we have no problem. This cranks are spinning very well. This grease is ice cold right now from that cold spindle. But that is how you get the odds and ends out of these creaky, sometimes creaky, Cannondale Si cranks. Make sure that it doesn't cause you problems down